she's not dead. Those 3 words, spoken by a child, sliced through the quiet sadness of the graveyard. My 9-year-old daughter, Zoe, stood alone, a small figure in a black dress, surrounded by hundreds of mourners. They were all here for me. They were all here for my funeral. From inside my own casket I heard the gasps. I heard the confused whispers ripple through the crowd like a sudden wind. The polished mahogany box I was lying in muffled the sound, but I could feel the shock in the air. "She's not dead," Zoe shouted again, her voice stronger this time, filled with a certainty that defied the scene around her. "She's alive." I felt a jolt of panic. I was alive, yes, but this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was trapped in the darkness, listening to the world outside erupt into chaos because of my daughter's brave, terrified words. A man's voice, angry and sharp, cut through the noise. It was my husband, Adrian. "Zoe, stop this right now. You're upset, sweetheart, that's all." "No," she cried. "He's lying. My mom is in there and she's alive." Her words were a lightning bolt, and in that moment, everything I had known, everything I had believed about my perfect life, came crashing down. I was lying in a coffin at my own funeral, and my little girl was trying to save my life. But how did I get here? How did my fairy tale life turn into this living nightmare? Let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand the end, you have to see how the trap was first set. Before I continue, if this is your first time on this channel, do me a quick favor. Please hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single moment of this story. And don't forget to hit the like button and comment below with your country so I know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Now let's go back to where it all started. My name is Elara Vance, and if you had told me 5 years ago that I would end up listening to my own funeral from inside a box, I would have laughed. My life was perfect, or so I thought. I grew up in Dallas, the only child of Marcus Vance, a billionaire who had built his empire from a single rusty truck. He created Vance Vanguard Transport, one of the biggest logistics companies in all of Texas. We had fleets of cargo trucks, city buses, and delivery vans. If it moved things from one place to another, my father owned it. You'd think growing up with that much money would make me spoiled, and maybe in some ways it did. But my father taught me something more valuable than money. He taught me to treat every single person with respect. "Elara," he would say, his voice kind but firm, "the person who cleans your office at night is just as important as the person who runs it. Never forget that everyone matters." I watched him live by those words. He knew the names of all his employees, from the top executives to the night janitors. He went to their kids' graduations and always treated them like family. That lesson stuck with me. Even when I had everything, I knew that kindness was the one thing that was truly priceless. I was 23 when I met Adrian Thorne. Even now, saying his name feels like swallowing glass. But back then he was everything I ever dreamed of. He was tall, handsome, and had a smile that could make you forget your own name. We met at a big charity gala in Fort Worth. I was there representing my father's company, shaking hands and making small talk, feeling completely bored. That's when Adrian walked up to me. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere but here," he said with that devastating smile. I laughed, surprised. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who feels the exact same way," he replied. "I'm Adrian Thorne. Just a financial consultant trying to look important." I liked that he didn't seem to know who I was. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a normal woman talking to a normal man, not a billionaire's daughter. Just Elara. We talked for hours that night. He made me laugh until my stomach hurt, and he listened, really listened when I talked about my dreams. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We started dating the next week. Adrian was the perfect partner. He sent flowers to my office, planned surprise weekend trips, and told me every single day how much he loved me. My father had his doubts, I could tell. He never said anything bad about Adrian, but he watched him with a careful eye. "You sure about this one, Elara?" he asked me once. "Daddy, I love him," I said, as if that was the only answer that mattered. "Just make sure he loves you for you," my father said softly, "not for what you have." I brushed his worries aside. I was young and in love, and I thought I knew everything. I thought Adrian was different. I was so terribly wrong. A year later, we were married in a beautiful ceremony at a massive estate just outside Dallas. It was a fairy tale wedding with hundreds of guests and a dress that cost more than a car. When Adrian saw me walking down the aisle, he had tears in his eyes. I thought they were tears of love. Now I know they were tears of victory. He had just locked down the greatest fortune in Texas. The first few years of our marriage were wonderful. We bought a beautiful mansion in a gated community, and I worked with my father at the company while Adrian built his own consulting business. Then I became pregnant with Zoe. My father was overjoyed. He cried the day I told him he was going to be a grandfather. The moment they placed Zoe in my arms, my entire world changed. This tiny, perfect little human was mine to love and protect. Adrian seemed happy too, whispering promises to our daughter about how he would give her the world. I should have paid more attention to those words. He planned on giving her my world by taking it from me. My father passed away when Zoe was just 2 years old. It was a sudden, massive heart attack. Just like that, the man who was my hero was gone. I was completely broken. Adrian held me as I cried for weeks, promising he would help me get through it. "I'm here for you always," he'd say. More lies. All of it was lies. At the reading of the will, my father's lawyer announced that he had left his entire estate, the company, the properties, the investments, to me. I inherited everything. In that moment, I saw a flicker of pure, raw greed in Adrian's eyes. It was gone in a second, replaced by a supportive smile as he squeezed my hand. "Congratulations, my love," he said. "Your father knew you would protect his legacy." "Our legacy," I corrected him. "We're a team." "What's yours is mine," he smiled. I liked the sound of that. I thought he was being romantic. I had no idea he was already planning how to take it all away. I threw myself into running the company and I was good at it. I had my father's mind for business, and within a year, I had grown the company even bigger. Adrian acted proud, bragging to his friends about his powerhouse CEO wife. He loved the status it gave him. What I didn't see was the jealousy burning behind his eyes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the biggest mistake of my life. The one I made before we even said, "I do." It happened about 2 months before our wedding. We were having a romantic dinner at a quiet, expensive restaurant downtown. The lights were low and a soft piano was playing in the background. Adrian reached across the table and took my hand. "Elara," he said, his voice serious but gentle. "I know this isn't romantic, but I think we should sign a prenuptial agreement." I frowned. "A prenup? Adrian, why? Don't you trust me?" "Of course I do. It's not about that at all," he said quickly. "It's the opposite. I want to protect us. I don't want anyone to ever think I married you for your money. This document will make sure everything is fair." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a little confused. He pulled a thick document out of his briefcase and laid it on the table between us. "It's simple," he explained, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "It says that your father's company and everything you have now will always be yours. But anything we build together after we are married will belong to both of us 50-50. That way we are equal partners. No one can ever say I'm just a gold digger. It proves that what I want is a life with you, not your bank account." It sounded so reasonable. It sounded so noble. It sounded like exactly the kind of thing a man who truly loved me would suggest. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, ashamed that I had doubted him even for a second. "That makes perfect sense, Adrian," I said. "That's actually really thoughtful of you." He smiled that heart-stopping smile and slid the document across the table with a pen. I had my lawyer draw it up. It's pretty standard stuff. "Just sign here and we can go back to planning our honeymoon." I should have stopped. I should have said I wanted my own lawyer to look at it. A tiny voice in the back of my head screamed at me to wait, to read every word, to be careful. My father's warnings echoed in my memory. But I was 24 years old, blinded by love and busy planning the wedding of my dreams. I trusted him. I trusted him completely. To ask for a lawyer would be like saying I didn't believe him, and I couldn't bear the thought of hurting him. So I picked up the pen. I signed my name on the dotted lines without reading a single clause. I signed it blindly, foolishly, thinking I was signing a document of love and partnership. I had no idea I wasn't just signing a piece of paper. I was signing my own death warrant. The ink from my signature on that document felt like a permanent stain on my soul, but at the time all I felt was love. Adrian kissed me right there in the restaurant, a deep, passionate kiss that made me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. He told me that now our future was truly sealed, built on trust and equality. I believed him. I went into our marriage with a heart so full and open, I never thought to guard it. Life after my father's death settled into a new kind of normal. I was a CEO, a mother, and a wife. Our mansion in the suburbs of Dallas was a palace of success, with sprawling gardens and a staff to manage every detail. Our head housekeeper, Grace, was more than just an employee. She was a kind 50-year-old woman with warm eyes and a gentle soul who had worked for my father for years. I remembered his lessons and treated her like family. Every morning I'd find her in the kitchen and we'd talk while she prepared breakfast. "Good morning, Grace. What smells so wonderful today?" I'd ask. "Just some pancakes for Zoe, Mrs. Vance," she'd reply with a soft smile. "And your favorite tea is ready." She knew the small things that made my day better. In return, I made sure she was taken care of. When her son needed money for college, I set up a scholarship fund for him. Adrian thought I was being too soft. "They're staff, Elara, not your relatives," he'd say, a cold edge to his voice that was becoming more common. "They're people, Adrian," I would reply. "And they deserve to be treated with kindness." He would just shake his head and walk away, as if my compassion was an annoying flaw he had to tolerate. I didn't realize then that he hated seeing me connect with anyone else. He wanted me completely isolated, with only him to rely on. Zoe grew into the most incredible little girl. She was smart, curious, and saw the world with a clarity that sometimes scared me. She noticed things I was trying my best to ignore. One evening when she was 8, she was curled up on the couch beside me reading a book, while I tried to tell Adrian about a major deal I had just closed at work. He wasn't listening. He was just scrolling through his phone, his face lit by the cold blue light of the screen. "Mommy," Zoe whispered, tugging on my sleeve. "Why does Daddy always look at his phone when you're talking?" "He's just busy with work, sweetie," I said, making the same excuse I always did. "No," she insisted, her big brown eyes serious. "He does it to make you feel small." I see the look in his eyes. I was stunned. How could my 8-year-old see the very thing I was pretending wasn't happening? "Zoe, that's not a very nice thing to say about your father," I scolded gently. She just looked at me with a wisdom far beyond her years. "I'm just telling you what I see, Mom." She was trying to warn me. She saw the monster long before I was willing to open my eyes. Over the next year, Adrian's behavior grew colder. The loving, attentive man I had married was slowly disappearing, replaced by someone critical and distant. He started questioning my business decisions, suggesting I wasn't smart enough to run the company on my own. "Are you sure you read that contract properly, Elara? Maybe you should let me look it over. You can be a bit too trusting." "I've got it, Adrian. I've been doing this for years." "I'm just trying to help," he'd say, but it didn't sound like help. It sounded like an insult. He started staying out late. "Business meetings," he'd claim, coming home smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. I wanted to believe him. I wanted my perfect life back so badly that I pushed my doubts down, burying them under a mountain of denial. But you can only ignore the truth for so long before it claws its way to the surface. It happened on a rainy Wednesday in October. I came home from work early, feeling sick with a pounding headache. The stress of running the company and dealing with my increasingly unhappy marriage was finally getting to me. I walked into our home office to find some aspirin. Adrian wasn't home. His car was gone, and I assumed he was at another one of his late-night meetings. His laptop was on the desk, left open. I would never normally look through his things, but as I glanced at the screen, a file name caught my eye. It was simple and terrifying. It just said, "The Plan." My blood ran cold. My heart started thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. What plan? A voice inside me, the one I had been ignoring for years, screamed at me to open it. I sat down in his leather chair, my hands shaking, and clicked the file. What I read felt like a script from a horror movie. My life, our life, laid out in cold, calculated phases. Phase 1. Secure marriage. Target identified, Elara Vance. Lonely, trusting, desperate for love. Easy to manipulate. Secure her with charm and romance. Phase 2. Secure inheritance. Wait for father's death. Must appear natural. After she inherits, get her to sign documents granting me control in case of an emergency. Phase 3 in progress. The prenup. Signed without review. Document ensures 100% of assets transfer to me upon her death or permanent incapacitation. The key to everything. Phase 4. Final execution. Timeline. Within the next 3 months. Method. A slow-acting, untraceable substance to be introduced into her daily tea. Will mimic a sudden heart condition. Doctor will suspect nothing. Must look tragic and natural. Phase 5. New life. Take Z and disappear with S. Begin new life in Europe. Full access to the Vance fortune. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My vision swam. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. My husband, the father of my child, had been planning to murder me from the very beginning. Our entire love story was a lie. I scrolled down further, my body trembling violently. Below the plan was a chain of messages between Adrian and someone named S. My stomach twisted into a knot of pure sickness as I read. "S, I can't wait for this to be over. I'm so tired of seeing pictures of you with her. Adrian, soon my love. Soon we'll have everything we've ever dreamed of. Her entire empire will be ours. Just a little longer. What about the girl? Zoe? Adrian, I'll take her. She's my daughter. Having her with us makes the story more believable. The grieving father starting a new life with his child. No one will question it. You're a genius, my love. Just get it done. I want our real life to start. Adrian, patience, Sophia. Just a little more patience and Elara Vance will be nothing more than a bad memory and a very, very large bank account. Sophia. I knew a Sophia. A beautiful woman from his consulting firm he'd introduced me to at a party. He'd called her his work wife, and they had all laughed. The lie was so huge, so monstrous, it was hard to comprehend. I felt a rage building inside me so hot it burned away the fear. He wasn't just going to kill me. He was going to use our daughter as a prop in his new life. He called her, the girl, like she was a piece of luggage he had to carry. With trembling hands I hit print. I needed a copy. I needed proof. The printer whirred to life, spitting out the pages of my death sentence. I grabbed the warm sheets of paper, my mind racing. Who do I call? The police? A lawyer? How do I get Zoe out of here? How do I protect us? And then I heard it. The sound of the garage door opening. My heart stopped. He was home. He was here. I quickly shoved the printed pages into the pocket of my blazer, my hands so slick with sweat I could barely hold them. I tried to stand to look normal, but my legs felt like jelly. Elara? Adrian's voice called out from the hallway. You're home early. His footsteps grew closer. I was trapped. I was standing in his office, holding the evidence of his plan to murder me. I tried to calm my breathing, to force a smile onto my face. He appeared in the doorway, and for the first time, I saw him without the filter of love. I saw the coldness in his eyes, the cruel twist of his mouth. I saw the predator that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Are you okay? He asked, but there was no warmth in his voice. You look pale. Just a headache, I managed to say, my own voice sounding strange and shaky to my ears. I was just getting some aspirin. I tried to walk past him to escape the room, but he put a hand on my arm, stopping me. His grip was like steel. You look more than just sick. You look scared. What's wrong? His eyes narrowed, and then they dropped to my blazer pocket, where the sharp corner of the printed pages was sticking out just slightly. A tiny white triangle against the black fabric. And in that instant everything changed. The mask didn't just slip, he ripped it off. What? He asked, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. Is that in your pocket? It's nothing, I stammered, trying to cover it with my hand, but I was too slow. He snatched the papers from my pocket with lightning speed. His face went white as he saw what he was holding. Then a dark, ugly red spread up his neck. You read this, he hissed. It wasn't a question. Adrian, what is this? I demanded, my voice trembling but trying to sound strong. What is this plan? Who is Sophia? He didn't answer. He just stared at me, and a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. It was a smile of pure evil. You really are stupid, aren't you? He said softly. I knew you were trusting, but I never imagined you were this foolish. You couldn't just leave it alone, could you? You were going to kill me, I whispered, the reality of it finally hitting me with the force of a physical blow. You were planning to poison me. He laughed, a cold, empty sound that echoed in the quiet room. From the very beginning, my love. From the first moment I laid eyes on you. Did you really think a man like me would fall for someone so average? I researched you, Elara. I knew your father's net worth down to the last dollar. I knew you were a lonely little rich girl desperate for a fairy tale. And I gave it to you. Every word was a knife in my heart. You never loved me. Love? He spat the word like it was poison. What is love compared to $1 billion? You were a means to an end. A very profitable one. He took a step towards me, crumpling the papers in his fist. I backed away, my legs bumping into the hard edge of his desk. I was trapped. I can't believe I'm going to have to do this now, he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair as if this was just a minor inconvenience. I had it all planned so perfectly. A few more months and you would have just drifted away in your sleep. It would have been so clean. My mind raced, searching for an escape. The door was blocked by him. The window was 2 stories up. You won't get away with this, I said, the words feeling weak and useless. Won't I? He challenged, his smile widening. You have no proof that a jury would believe. Just some printed notes that I'll say you faked because you were angry I was leaving you. It's your word against mine. And who are they going to believe? The hysterical, emotional wife or the loving, supportive husband? He was right. And we both knew it. I had discovered his plan, but I couldn't prove it. Not in a way that would matter. Not in a way that would save me. He took another step closer, his eyes glinting with a terrifying darkness. I could smell the expensive cologne he always wore, the scent I used to love, which now smelled like death. "You know," he said, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that was more frightening than any shout, "that little prenup you signed so trustingly? The one about us being equal partners." He let out a short, cruel laugh. "I lied about what that said too. You really should have read the fine print, Elara." My blood turned to ice. What did it say?" His smile was triumphant. "It says that in the event of your death or permanent incapacitation, everything, and I do mean everything, including your father's company, the houses, the stocks, every last penny, transfers directly and immediately to your surviving spouse." He leaned in, his face inches from mine, his breath hot on my skin. Me. The room started to spin. The document, the loving words, the lies. It was all a trap. My entire life with him had been a lie. "And now that you know," he whispered, his voice a silky, terrifying threat, "it looks like the timeline on your tragic accident just got moved up." His words hung in the air between us, a death sentence delivered with a smile. My mind, which had been frozen in terror, suddenly snapped into action. Survival instinct took over, a raw, primal need to live, to protect my daughter. I feigned collapse, my body slumping forward as if in defeat. "Adrian, please," I begged, my voice a broken whisper. "You can have the money. Take it all. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't hurt me. Think of Zoe." It was a desperate gamble, a plea for a mercy I knew he didn't possess. But it was also a distraction. As I sagged against the desk, my hands secretly fumbled behind me, searching for something, anything to use as a weapon. My fingers brushed against something heavy and solid. The base of his expensive antique desk lamp. He watched me with an expression of cold amusement. "Oh, Elara. It's too late for bargaining. You know my secret. That makes you a liability." He reached a hand out, intending to grab me, to silence me forever. That's when I moved. With a surge of adrenaline, I swung the heavy brass lamp with all my strength, catching him on the side of the head with a sickening crack. He staggered back, his eyes wide with surprise and pain, a dark line of blood instantly appearing on his temple. "You," he started to say, but I didn't wait. I scrambled over the desk, knocking over papers and a framed photo of us, a smiling, happy couple. A lie. I ran. I flew out of the office and into the grand two-story foyer of our home. My only thought was Zoe. I had to get to Zoe. She was upstairs in her room, probably playing with her dolls, completely unaware of the monster that lived in her house. "Zoe!" I screamed, my voice raw with panic as I sprinted for the sweeping staircase. "Zoe, we have to go. Now." Behind me, I heard a roar of pure rage. Adrian had recovered. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw him standing in the office doorway, his hand pressed to his bleeding head, his face twisted into a mask of pure fury. The polite, charming man was gone forever. Only the predator remained. "You're not getting out of here, Elara," he bellowed, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. I was halfway up the stairs when he started after me. He was faster, stronger. I could hear his heavy footsteps pounding on the marble steps behind me, getting closer and closer. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but I kept climbing, pulling myself up by the polished wooden banister. I reached the top of the stairs and ran down the long, carpeted hallway toward Zoe's room at the very end. The door was closed. "Zoe, open the door." I shrieked, banging my fists against the wood. "It's Mommy. Please, baby, open the door." I could hear Adrian right behind me now. I could hear his ragged, angry breathing. I didn't have time. I twisted the doorknob, praying it wasn't locked. It turned. I burst into her room, a cheerful space filled with pastel colors and stuffed animals, and slammed the heavy oak door shut just as Adrian's body slammed against it from the other side. The impact shuddered through the wood. Zoe was standing in the middle of the room, her eyes wide with terror, a half-dressed Barbie doll clutched in her hand. "Mommy, what's happening? Why is Daddy yelling?" "There's no time, baby," I gasped, my back pressed against the door as Adrian pounded on it from the other side. "We have to hide." The door had a lock, a simple push-button one. I jammed it in, knowing it wouldn't hold him for long. He was strong enough to break it down. "Elara, open this door," he roared, his voice muffled but filled with terrifying menace. "You can't hide from me. I will break it down." "Mommy, I'm scared," Zoe whimpered, tears starting to stream down her pale cheeks. I looked around the room frantically. There was a large walk-in closet against the far wall. "In here," I said, grabbing her hand and pulling her towards it. "Get in the closet. Be very, very quiet. No matter what you hear, do not make a sound. Do you understand me?" She nodded, her little body trembling. I pushed her inside, behind a row of her brightly colored dresses, and then I faced the bedroom door, my heart hammering against my ribs. What now? My phone was downstairs. There was no phone in her room. No way to call for help. The pounding on the door stopped. For a moment, there was a dead, terrifying silence. I held my breath, listening. What was he doing? Then I heard it. A scraping sound. The sound of a key sliding into the old-fashioned keyhole on the outside of the door. My blood ran cold. He had a master key. The lock I had pushed was useless. I backed away from the door as I heard the click of the lock turning. The doorknob began to rotate, slowly, deliberately. The door creaked open. Adrian stood in the doorway, a chillingly calm expression on his face. The blood from the cut on his head had trickled down his cheek, a stark red line against his pale skin. "There you are," he said softly, as if we were playing a game of hide-and-seek. "Did you really think you could get away?" I pushed a heavy toy chest in front of the closet door, a flimsy barrier to protect my daughter. I stood between him and her, my body a shield. "Stay away from her, Adrian." He took a step into the room, his eyes scanning the space. "Where is she?" I heard her. "Zoe, come out, wherever you are. Daddy's not going to hurt you." His voice was sickly sweet, a poison candy. I knew he was lying. He had already called her a tool. He would do anything to her to get what he wanted. "You will not touch her," I said, my voice shaking but filled with a protective fury I didn't know I possessed. "Oh, I will," he said, taking another step closer. "But first I have to deal with you. You've made this so much more complicated than it needed to be, Elara. So much messier." He lunged. I dodged, and he crashed into a small table, sending books and crayons scattering across the floor. I ran for the other side of the room, trying to keep the big four-poster bed between us. "Stop running," he snarled, his composure finally cracking. He picked up a thick, hardcover book from the floor and hurled it at me. I ducked, and it smashed against the wall behind me, leaving a dent in the plaster. We circled the bed like two animals in a cage. He was bigger, stronger, but I was faster, fueled by terror and a mother's fierce love. "Mommy," a tiny voice whispered from the closet. Adrian's head snapped towards the sound. A slow, triumphant smile spread across his face. "There she is." He started for the closet. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran and launched myself at his back, wrapping my arms around his neck, clawing at his face, screaming. He roared in frustration, trying to buck me off like a wild horse. He stumbled back, crashing into the wall, trying to crush me between his body and the hard surface. Stars exploded behind my eyes as my head hit the wall, but I held on, digging my nails into his skin. He finally managed to grab my hair, yanking my head back with a brutal tug. "Get off me, you!" He threw me off him and I went flying, my body hitting the floor with a painful thud. The wind was knocked out of me and for a moment I lay there, gasping for air, the room spinning. He stood over me, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling. The cut on his head was bleeding more freely now, and his eyes were wild with rage. He looked down at me and I saw his decision in his eyes. He was going to finish it. Right here. Right now. He took a step towards me. I tried to scramble backward to get away, but I was too slow. "Mom, no." Zoe screamed from inside the closet. The closet door burst open and my tiny 9-year-old daughter ran out, holding the only weapon she could find, a small wooden baseball bat from her sports trophies. With a cry of pure rage and fear, she swung it with all her might, hitting Adrian squarely in the back of the knee. He yelled in pain and surprise, his leg buckling beneath him. He stumbled, giving me the precious seconds I needed. I kicked out with my foot, aiming for his other knee. He went down, crashing to the floor. "Zoe, run!" I screamed, scrambling to my feet. "Go. Get Grace. Call 911. Zoe didn't hesitate. She dropped the bat and sprinted out of the room, her small feet flying down the hallway. I turned to follow her, but Adrian wasn't done. He lunged from the floor, grabbing my ankle. His grip was like a vice. I fell hard, my chin hitting the wooden floor. I kicked and fought, but he held on, dragging me back, away from the door, away from freedom. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, crawling over me, his weight pinning me to the floor. His hands went to my throat. I clawed at his hands, my vision starting to go dark at the edges as he squeezed, cutting off my air. I couldn't breathe. I could hear Zoe screaming my name from somewhere far away. I could hear other voices now too. Grace, shouting. confusion. But they were too far away. They wouldn't get here in time. Adrien leaned down, his face inches from mine, his eyes filled with a triumphant, murderous gleam. "It's over, Elara," he whispered, his thumbs pressing harder into my windpipe. My struggles grew weaker. The sounds of the house faded away. The darkness was closing in, a thick, suffocating blanket. My last conscious thought was of Zoe. My brave, beautiful daughter. I had to save her. But I was failing. The world went black. The world was fading to a pinprick of light. My lungs burned, empty. His face, twisted with hate, was the last thing I saw. My daughter's screams were a distant echo. This was it. This was the end. And then a new sound cut through the darkness. A woman's shriek, sharp and piercing. "Mr. Thorne. What are you doing? Get off of her." The pressure on my throat vanished. Air, raw and painful, rushed back into my lungs. I coughed, a deep, ragged sound, my body convulsing on the floor. The world swam back into focus in blurry shapes and colors. I saw Grace, our housekeeper, standing in the doorway, her face a mask of horror. Behind her was David, our gardener, his eyes wide with shock. He must have heard the screams from outside. Adrian scrambled off me, his transformation immediate and shocking. The murderous rage vanished, replaced in an instant by a look of wild-eyed panic and concern. He was acting. This was a performance. "Grace, thank God," he cried, his voice breaking convincingly. "Help me. She's had some kind of breakdown. She just snapped." He rushed to my side, trying to help me up, but I flinched away from his touch, scrambling backward until my back hit the wall. I couldn't speak, could only gasp for air, my throat feeling like it was on fire. "She came home with a headache, said she wasn't feeling well," Adrian said, his story tumbling out in a frantic, believable rush. "Then she started screaming, accusing me of crazy things. She attacked me." He pointed to the bloody cut on his temple, the one I had given him with the lamp. "I was just trying to calm her down. She was thrashing around and she fell and hit her head. I think she's seriously hurt." Grace looked from Adrian's panicked face to my terrified one. She saw the raw, red marks blooming on my neck where his hands had been. She saw the terror in my eyes. I tried to shake my head to tell her he was lying, but no words would come out. All I could do was stare at her, my eyes pleading with her to see the truth. "Call an ambulance," David the gardener said, already pulling out his phone. "Yes, hurry," Adrian urged. He knelt beside me again, his voice dropping to a whisper for my ears only, a venomous hiss beneath the sounds of panic. "Not one word, Elara. Not one word, or I swear I will finish this right in the hospital. Zoe will watch you die." The threat was a shard of ice in my heart. He would do it. He would kill me and he would destroy our daughter without a second thought. The darkness swirled around me again, and this time I didn't fight it. I let it take me, my body going limp on the floor as the sirens wailed in the distance. I existed in a place of shadows and echoes. I was not awake, but I was not gone. It was like being at the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. I could hear sounds from the world above, but they were distorted and far away. The steady beep of a machine. The soft squeak of rubber-soled shoes on a tiled floor. Muffled voices. Sometimes, a voice would come through clearly. Adrian's voice. He would sit by my bedside holding my hand, and the warmth of his touch felt like a snake coiling around my wrist. The nurses and doctors couldn't hear the lie in his tone. They only heard the words. "Come back to me, Elara," he would whisper whenever a doctor was in the room. "Please, baby. Zoe needs her mother. I need my wife." The doctors would praise his dedication. "You have a very devoted husband, Mrs. Vance," they'd say to my still form. "He hasn't left your side." If only they knew. If only they could see the monster sitting there, I would scream in my silent prison. But I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even open my eyes. I was trapped, a ghost in my own body, forced to listen to my murderer play the role of a saint. The doctors called it a coma. They said I had a severe traumatic brain injury. They said the fall Adrien had invented, had caused bleeding in my brain. They didn't know about the strangulation that had starved my brain of oxygen just moments before. They told Adrien it was touch and go. They weren't sure if I would ever wake up. I could hear the hope in his voice when he asked them, "But what are her chances, doctor?" Really? He was praying for the worst. While I drifted in that endless darkness, my daughter was living through her own waking nightmare. Adrien brought Zoe home from the hospital, to the house that was now a prison. He never let her out of his sight. He told the school she was too traumatized to attend classes. The truth was he was terrified she would talk. That first night he sat her down in the living room, the space feeling cold and empty without me there. "Zoe," he said, his voice soft but with an undertone of steel. "We need to talk about what happened with Mommy." Zoe, her face pale and her eyes red from crying, just stared at him. "Mommy is very, very sick," he said, his expression full of fake sadness. "The doctors say her brain is hurt. The only thing that will help her get better is if she can rest peacefully without any stress." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Zoe shook her head, clutching a stuffed elephant I had won for her at the state fair. "If the police hear a confusing story," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "if they think there was a big, loud fight, they will start an investigation. Will be stressful. There will be reporters and lawyers. All of that stress will travel to Mommy in the hospital, through the air like a bad dream. And it might be too much for her heart. The shock could stop it." He paused, letting the terrifying words sink in. He was telling a 9-year-old girl that telling the truth would kill her mother. "Do you want to be the reason Mommy's heart stops, Zoe?" he whispered. Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head violently. "No." "Good girl," he said, his voice instantly warm and fatherly again. "So, if anyone asks, you tell them this: Mommy came home with a bad headache. She was sad and confused and she fell down. It was a terrible accident. That's all. Can you remember that?" She nodded, sobbing. "Say it," he commanded. "Mommy was sad, and she fell," Zoe whispered, her voice choked with tears. "It was an accident." "Again," he ordered. "It was an accident," she repeated, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. "Perfect," he said, patting her on the head. "You're a good daughter. You're helping Mommy get better." From that day on, Zoe lived in a world of silent terror. She followed his rules. She ate what he put in front of her. She repeated the lie to the police detective who came to the house, with Adrian sitting right beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder in a gesture that looked like comfort but felt like a cage. She did everything he said, because she believed her mother's life depended on her silence. But someone else was watching. Someone who knew our family. Someone who loved me. Grace saw everything. She saw the way Zoe would flinch whenever Adrian entered a room. She saw the way my daughter, once so bright and bubbly, now moved like a little ghost through the halls of our home, her eyes empty and haunted. She had been there at the beginning. She had heard my screams. She had seen the marks on my neck. She knew Adrian's story of a breakdown and a fall didn't add up. 4 days she watched and waited, her heart breaking for the little girl trapped in a house with a monster. She knew she had to do something, but she didn't know what. She was just the housekeeper. Who would believe her against a charming, powerful billionaire? Her chance came nearly a week after I was taken to the hospital. Adrien had to go to a meeting with my lawyers, the lawyers he was already manipulating to gain control of my assets. He was so confident in his control over Zoe that he left her at home in Grace's care for 2 hours. It was the first time Zoe had been alone, away from his watchful eye, since the attack. Grace found her in the kitchen, staring blankly at a glass of milk. Grace's movements were quiet and gentle as she sat down at the table across from her. She didn't ask any questions at first. She just started talking in a soft, soothing voice. "I miss your mother's laugh," Grace said, her eyes warm and kind. "The whole house feels so quiet without it, doesn't it?" Zoe didn't look up, but a single tear rolled down her cheek and splashed onto the table. "I know you're scared, sweet girl," Grace continued softly. "And I want you to know, whatever is happening, whatever you're afraid of, you are not alone. I am here. And I will believe you." That was all it took. The simple words, "I will believe you," broke the dam of fear and secrets that had been building inside Zoe for days. She looked up at Grace, her face crumpling, and the truth came spilling out in a desperate, hiccuping whisper. "He lied, Grace," she sobbed, the words tumbling out so fast they were almost impossible to understand. "He lied about everything. Mommy found his plan on the computer to hurt her and take her money with another lady named Sophia, and she got mad and he hit her and I heard it, and then he chased her and I hid in the closet and I heard them fighting and he hurt her really bad and he told me if I tell anyone then Mommy's heart will stop and she'll die and it will be my fault." She collapsed into gut-wrenching sobs, her small body shaking with the weight of her terrible secret. Grace was out of her chair in an instant, pulling the trembling child into a fierce, protective hug, her own tears streaming down her face. She held Zoe tight, rocking her gently as the little girl cried herself out. "Oh, you brave, brave girl," Grace whispered into her hair, her voice thick with emotion and a rising tide of fury. "You did the right thing. You told me. And I believe every single word." She held Zoe for a long time, until the sobs subsided into sniffles. Then she pulled back, her hands on Zoe's small shoulders, her eyes serious. "Listen to me, Zoe," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Your father is a very dangerous man. But we are going to stop him. You and me. We are going to save your mother." Zoe looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a tiny flickering spark of hope. "But how? He's at the hospital with her right now. What if he tries to hurt her again there?" Grace's face went pale. The thought hit her with the force of a physical blow. Zoe was right. Adrian had failed to kill me at the house. He wasn't the kind of man who would give up. He was at the hospital, playing the part of the grieving husband, with complete access to me. The doctors listened to him. The nurses trusted him. He could walk into my room at any time of the night. He could slip something into my four. He could smother me with a pillow. And everyone would think it was just a tragic complication from my accident. My life wasn't saved. I was in more danger than ever before. "He's going to try to finish the job," Grace whispered, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "And we have to stop him before he does." The horror of Zoe's words hit Grace like a physical blow. He's going to try to finish the job. Adrian was not just a liar, he was a monster who would not stop until he got what he wanted. My life was hanging by a thread, and the only people who knew the truth were a terrified 9-year-old girl and her loyal housekeeper. Grace's mind raced. Calling 911 was too risky. It would be her word against a powerful, charming billionaire. Adrian would twist the story, paint her as a disgruntled employee, and paint Zoe as a confused child. They needed more than a story. They needed undeniable proof. Her hands shaking, Grace pulled out her phone. She didn't call the police. She called a man she trusted more than anyone, a man who had helped her family years ago. Detective Miller, a veteran of the Dallas Police Department who went to her church. "Miller, it's Grace," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper as she hurried Zoe into the pantry, closing the door for privacy. "I'm in terrible trouble. The Vances are in terrible trouble. Mr. Thorne, he tried to kill his wife. And I think he's going to try again at the hospital." She explained everything Zoe had told her, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. The plan on the computer, the attack, Adrian's threats, Zoe being forced to lie. Detective Miller listened in silence, his mind piecing together the horrifying puzzle. "Grace, listen to me very carefully," he said when she finished, his voice calm and serious. "You and Zoe need to act like everything is normal. When Adrian gets home, you must pretend you know nothing. This is the most important part. Can Zoe do that?" Grace looked at Zoe, who was huddled on the floor, her eyes wide with fear. "She can," Grace said with a confidence she didn't feel. "She's the bravest girl I know." "Good," Miller said. "Because we are going to catch him. But we have to let him walk into our trap. I'm on my way to the hospital now. We're going to set up a little surprise for Mr. Thorne." That afternoon, while Adrian was at the hospital playing the devoted husband, a team of plain-clothed officers, disguised as hospital maintenance, moved into my hospital wing. With the help of the hospital director, who was horrified by the story, they installed tiny, almost invisible cameras in my room. One was hidden in the smoke detector on the ceiling. Another was disguised as a button on the television. A third was placed in a vase of flowers on my windowsill. From a small, dark security room down the hall, Detective Miller and his team could now see and hear everything that happened at my bedside. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait for the monster to show his face. The next 2 days were torture for Zoe and Grace. Adrian returned home, and Zoe had to play the part of the obedient, traumatized daughter. She had to sit beside him on the couch, letting him read her stories with the same hands that had tried to strangle her mother. Every time he looked at her, she had to force a smile, her heart pounding with terror. On the third day, the doctors, who were now working with the police, gave Adrian some news. "Mr. Thorne, it's incredible," a doctor told him, his voice full of fake excitement. "We're seeing increased brain activity." Elara squeezed the nurse's hand this morning. "These are very positive signs. She might be starting to wake up." From the security room, the police watched Adrian's reaction on the hidden cameras. To the doctor, he looked overjoyed, his eyes filling with tears. "That's a miracle," he cried. But the camera saw the truth. It saw the flicker of pure panic in his eyes. It saw the way his jaw tightened. His window of opportunity was closing. He had to act now. That night, he put Zoe to bed and then made a phone call in his office, not knowing that the police had also secured a warrant to listen to his calls. "Sophia," he whispered into the phone. "Change of plans. Her condition is improving. I have to move up the timeline. I'm taking care of it tonight. Get our tickets ready. By this time tomorrow we'll be free. Hours later, just after midnight, the security room at the hospital was silent and tense. On the monitors they watched as a figure slipped into my room. It was Adrian. He moved with a quiet confidence, convinced he was alone. He stood over my bed for a long moment, a cold smile on his face. "You just couldn't stay asleep, could you, Elara?" he whispered, and the hidden microphones picked up every chilling word. "Always had to be a fighter. Well, this is one fight you're not going to win." He pulled a small syringe from his pocket filled with a clear liquid. The team in the security room zoomed in. Potassium chloride. A substance that would stop my heart and be almost impossible to trace. "Don't worry," he continued as he carefully injected the poison into my foreport. "It will be painless. They'll just say your body finally gave out." So tragic. He watched for another minute, then turned and walked out of the room, a victorious smirk on his face. He had no idea that an hour earlier the police had swapped my bag. He hadn't injected poison into my veins. He had injected it into a solution of a powerful sedative, a drug designed to send me into a state so deep it would perfectly mimic death. The next morning a nurse screamed. Doctors rushed in. They performed CPR for show and then with heavy hearts they pronounced me dead. At 7:15 a.m. Dr. Sinclair called Adrian. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice heavy with fake grief. "I'm so sorry. We lost her." Her heart just stopped. Adrian's performance was flawless. He sobbed into the phone. Then he went into Zoe's room to tell her that her mother was gone forever. Grace had to hold Zoe as she collapsed, her small body racked with a grief so real it was agonizing to watch. Grace couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Zoe had to believe I was dead or Adrian might see the lie in her eyes. For 3 days that brave little girl lived in a world of pure sorrow, while her father, believing he was a billionaire murderer who had gotten away with the perfect crime, planned a lavish funeral to show the world how much he loved his wife. The night before the funeral, Grace finally told her. "Zoe," she whispered in the dark of her room, "your mother isn't dead. She's alive. We tricked your father. And tomorrow you're going to be the one to save her." The day of the funeral was bright and sunny. Hundreds of people gathered in the cemetery, all dressed in black. I lay in a beautiful mahogany casket, deeply sedated but alive. The plan was timed perfectly. The sedatives would begin to wear off right around the time the service was ending. Adrian stood at the podium, his voice thick with fake tears as he told stories about his wonderful tragic wife. "Losing Elara," he said, choking back a sob, "has been the greatest pain of my life." That's when Zoe stood up. She stood in the front row, a tiny, trembling figure. "Charlotte, sit down," Adrian whispered harshly. But Zoe didn't sit. She took a deep breath, looked directly at the casket, and screamed the 3 words that would shatter the world. "She's not dead." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. "She's alive." Zoe screamed again, pointing a small, shaking finger. "My mom is in there and she's alive. He's a liar. He tried to kill her." Chaos erupted. Adrian rushed toward her, his face a mask of fury, but Grace blocked his path. "Stay away from her, you monster." "Then open it." Zoe cried out to the confused crowd. "If she's really dead, open the casket." Detective Miller stepped forward, his badge flashing in the sunlight. "Open it," he commanded. 2 men from the funeral home, their hands trembling, lifted the heavy lid of the casket. The crowd gasped. I lay there pale and still. For a heartbreaking second, it looked like Zoe was wrong. But then it happened. A tiny flutter of my eyelashes. A small, shuddering breath. "She's breathing," someone shouted. With a groan my eyes opened. I stared up at a sea of shocked faces at the bright blue Texas sky, completely confused. Where was I? The last thing I remembered was Adrian's hands on my throat. "Mom?" A small body launched itself at me, and I was wrapped in my daughter's arms. "Mom, you're alive. I saved you." And as I held my daughter, my mind finally catching up, I saw him. I saw Adrian held on the ground by 2 police officers, his face a picture of pure, disbelieving rage. "You were supposed to be dead," he screamed at me. "Lucas Bennett," Detective Miller said, his voice ringing out across the graveyard for all to hear. "You're under arrest for the attempted murder of your wife." I sat up in my own coffin, holding my crying, heroic daughter, and watched as they dragged the monster I had once loved away. It was over. We were safe. My 9-year-old girl, with 3 simple words, had faced down a monster and brought her mother back from the dead. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat and you want more just like it, please make sure you hit that like button. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss another story. Your support means the world to us. See you next time.